The night was silent, but the silence was cruel. The wind howled across the broken land, sharp and cold like knives cutting through skin. She lay curled in the corner of an abandoned shed, her thin body trembling as if her bones would break from the cold. Her kind had always spoken of warmth as something for the highborn, something meant for those who had power. For her, warmth was a dream, something she had never touched. She only knew the sting of frost, the bite of hunger, and the endless nights where sleep never came because the floor was nothing but hard steel or frozen ground. Her breaths were shallow. Each one felt heavy in her chest. She pulled her arms tighter around herself, but there was no blanket, no fire, nothing to keep her alive except her will to survive. She had grown up this way, always outside, always forgotten. Even as a child, when others had beds, she had been pushed to the coldest corners of the barracks, left to curl on scraps of cloth that smelled of mold. The older she grew, the more invisible she became. No one wanted to share space with someone marked as dirty heritage. No one wanted to give comfort to one who carried shame. Snow began to fall again, white flakes landing on her skin and melting slowly before freezing into droplets of ice. She could not remember when she last felt real heat. Maybe it had been when she was still very small, pressed against her mother's chest before they took her away. Since then, her life had been a trail of cold rooms, dark cages, and metal floors that stole every bit of warmth from her body. The memory of a warm touch had faded long ago. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Hunger was normal. Hunger was a companion that never left. She had learned to sleep through it, though now sleep refused to come. Her teeth chattered loudly in the dark. She pressed her lips together to silence the sound, afraid someone outside might hear. Fear had lived in her heart as long as she remembered. Fear of footsteps, fear of shadows, fear of the hunters who would punish her if they found her hiding in this ruined place. Her eyes closed for a moment, but every sound outside snapped them open again. The creak of branches in the wind, the crunch of snow settling, the distant roar of engines. She hugged her knees tighter. She whispered to herself, trying to stay awake. Just one night. Just one more night. She had whispered those words for years, promising herself she would survive until tomorrow. Tomorrow never brought warmth, but at least it meant she was still alive. Her fingers were numb now. She tried to rub them together, but there was no strength left in her hands. The cold was crawling deeper, wrapping itself around her chest. She thought maybe this would be the night she would not wake again. Maybe this was how her life ended, in silence, in cold, in loneliness. A bitter laugh almost escaped her lips, but her throat was too dry. She thought about how strange it was. Her people built ships that could cross the stars, but she, one of their own, had never even owned a blanket. The storm grew stronger. The shed's thin walls shook and snow began to slip through the gaps. She pressed her body closer to the wall, but it did not help. The cold was inside her bones now. She could not stop shaking. She pressed her forehead against her knees and let the tears fall. They froze on her cheeks almost at once. She hated crying, hated the weakness it showed, but the tears came anyway. Through blurred eyes, she looked at the door. It was half broken, leaning on rusted hinges. Beyond it was the endless white land, the storm swallowing everything. She thought of walking out into it, letting the cold take her quickly. But something inside her still clung to life. Stubborn, desperate. She stayed. She breathed. She waited. She thought of the stories she had once overheard in the barracks. Stories of humans, strange beings who were said to value warmth, kindness, and family. She remembered laughing quietly at those tales. To her, such things were impossible. She had never seen kindness. She had never seen anyone offer warmth without asking for something in return. She was certain no such beings existed. And yet, as the night grew darker, she found herself whispering again, if only someone could give me just one warm bed, one night without cold. Her body sagged as if giving up. Her eyelids grew heavy. The storm raged louder outside, but inside her heart it grew quiet. She felt the pull of sleep, deeper than she had ever known. A dangerous sleep, the kind from which she might not return. But she did not fight it this time. She let her eyes close. For a moment there was peace. No hunger, no fear, no cold, just darkness. Her breathing slowed. Her thoughts faded. Then, footsteps. She thought it was a dream at first, the sound of boots crunching on snow. But the steps grew closer, louder, until they stopped right outside the broken shed. Her eyes snapped open, wide with fear. She tried to move, but her body refused. She listened as the door creaked, the hinges whining. A shadow filled the doorway. Not alien soldiers, not hunters. The figure was tall, broad, wrapped in strange fabric she had never seen before. And then, through the storm, a voice, steady, deep, human. She could not believe it. A human here, on this frozen world. She blinked, thinking she was dreaming again. But the shadow stepped inside, and the warmth of his presence pushed against the cold air. She trembled, half in terror, half in hope, not knowing whether this night would be her last, or the first night of something she had never known. Warmth. Her eyes were still heavy when the sound of footsteps grew louder inside the ruined shed. She wanted to close them again and pretend it was only her imagination, but the cold weight of fear would not let her. The figure came closer, his steps slow and careful, as if he did not want to startle her. Through the blur of her vision, she saw him, different from her kind, his skin tone strange, his clothes thick and layered to fight the cold. She recognized the stories at once. This was no alien soldier, no one from her people. This was a human. Her heart beat faster. She had heard countless things about humans, that they were cunning, dangerous, violent. Some said they were liars, others said they were protectors. She did not know which was true, but right now, looking at him through frozen tears, she felt only one thing: fear. The man crouched down, studying her with sharp eyes. His breath steamed in the freezing air. He did not speak at first. He just looked at her, then at the half-frozen floor she was curled on. For a moment, she thought he would leave her there. Why wouldn't he? She was nothing, less than nothing. But instead, he reached forward. His gloved hand hovered above her shoulder, as if he was unsure whether to touch her or not. Finally, he spoke. His voice was rough, but there was something calm in it. "You'll die out here." She wanted to answer, to tell him she already knew that, but no words came from her dry throat. She only stared, shivering violently. He let out a sigh and slipped his arms under her body. Her heart nearly stopped. No one had ever picked her up before, not like this. She was so light, weak, and thin that his arms carried her as if she were a feather. The moment he lifted her, she felt something unbelievable: warmth. His body radiated heat through the thick fabric, and it was like stepping into a dream she had chased her entire life. She gasped softly, her frozen fingers twitching against his chest. He glanced at her but said nothing, only tightening his hold and moving quickly through the snowstorm. The wind beat against them, the snow stung her skin, but in his arms she felt safer than she ever had. Each step he took was steady, purposeful, as if the storm did not matter to him. Her head fell against his shoulder. She wanted to resist, to tell him to let her go before the soldiers found her here and killed him too. But the strength was gone from her body. Her lips parted and a weak whisper slipped out. "Why?" He didn't answer. Maybe he hadn't heard, or maybe he didn't know the answer himself. All she knew was that he kept walking, carrying her toward the faint glow of light she hadn't noticed before. It grew brighter as they approached, a small cabin standing against the endless white. Smoke curled from its chimney, and the sight made her chest ache. She had never known such a place could exist. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, and a rush of warm air spilled out. She winced, her skin burning as if fire touched it. The sudden heat was painful after so much cold, but it was also the sweetest pain she had ever felt. He set her down gently, lowering her onto a bed. A bed. Something soft, with blankets. Something that looked like it belonged to another world. She stared at it, unable to believe her body was resting on it. The human moved quickly, throwing more wood onto the fire, adjusting the blankets over her trembling body. She wanted to push them off, to run, to tell him she didn't deserve this. Instead, her voice cracked out, rough and broken. "Why would you? Give this to me." The man turned his head toward her. His face was shadowed by the firelight, but his eyes seemed tired, heavy with stories she could not guess. He hesitated before speaking, his voice quiet but firm. "Because you need it." She blinked at him, stunned. Her people never gave anything without reason. They never offered comfort without a price. Her mind spun with suspicion. What did he want from her? Was this a trap? She pulled the blanket closer to her chin, her eyes wide with fear, but her body betrayed her. It relaxed into the warmth, soaking it in greedily, even while her heart whispered warnings. He placed a cup of steaming liquid beside her. She looked at it, but did not reach for it. He did not force her. He only sat in a chair near the fire, watching the flames. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackle of burning wood. Her breath slowed. The warmth seeped into her frozen bones, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel like she was dying. She could not stop herself from staring at him. Why would a human risk helping her? Didn't he know her kind were hunted? Didn't he know they would kill him if they found her here? Her lips trembled, and she whispered again, "Why?" This time he looked at her. His gaze was steady, as if he saw through her fear, through her doubt, through every wall she had built around her heart. "Because no one deserves to freeze to death," he said simply. Her throat tightened. She did not understand this man, this strange creature from stories. But something inside her, something small and broken, stirred at his words. She turned her face into the blanket, hiding the tears that threatened to fall again. She hated crying, but she could not stop. The warmth of the fire, the softness of the bed, the human's calm presence, all of it pressed against the cold walls of her heart. She thought, maybe this night was different. Maybe she was not meant to die here after all. Yet even as the thought came, fear clawed back. If the soldiers came, if they saw her in his bed, they would not spare him. Still, as sleep began to pull her down, she felt her body give in to the comfort she had been denied all her life. She whispered one last time, her voice so faint it was almost lost to the fire. "I never had a warm bed. Until tonight." Then her eyes closed, not from weakness this time, but from the first peaceful rest she had ever known. When she woke, the fire was still burning, and the soft weight of the blanket pressed around her like a shield. For a moment, she thought it was a dream. But then her eyes found him. The human sat near the fire, his arms folded across his chest, his head tilted forward as if he had dozed off in the chair. The light from the flames carved sharp lines across his face. He looked strong, but also tired, like someone who had carried too much for too long. She stayed still, afraid that if she moved, everything would vanish. Her mind whispered warnings. Nothing came free. There was always a cost. Kindness was only a mask, hiding the price that would be demanded later. She knew this truth better than anyone, and yet the warmth wrapped around her, refusing to let her believe fully in her suspicions. Slowly, she pushed the blanket down and sat up. The sudden motion made the human stir. His eyes opened, and for a moment, they locked on hers. She froze like a trapped animal. But he only blinked, rubbed his face with one hand, and gave a small nod. "You're awake," he said, his voice low. She wanted to ask him again why he was doing this, but her throat tightened. Instead, she gave a small nod, her eyes darting away. Her fingers picked at the blanket nervously, twisting the fabric between them. He rose from the chair, crossed the room, and set another cup of warm liquid beside her. Steam curled from the surface, carrying a smell she did not recognize. She looked at it with suspicion. He noticed. His voice softened. "It's safe. Just water with herbs. Helps warm the body." She stared at him, trying to read his face. Was this the moment the trap would spring? Would he force her, demand something in return? But his eyes held no sharpness, no hunger, only a calm steadiness. Reluctantly, she lifted the cup and took a sip. The warmth slid down her throat like fire, spreading heat through her chest. She nearly cried at the feeling. The human watched, but he did not smile. He only turned back to the fire and added more wood. The crackle filled the silence again. Minutes passed before she found her voice. "You shouldn't have helped me," she whispered. He looked at her from across the flames. "Why not?" "They'll kill you if they find me here." Her words trembled with fear. She hugged the blanket tighter around herself. "You don't know what they'll do." His jaw tightened. But his voice stayed calm. "I know enough, but I'm not the kind of man who leaves someone to freeze outside." She shook her head, unable to believe it. "You don't understand. I'm not worth it. I'm nothing. My people cast me out. To them, I'm less than dirt." The human's eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned forward in the chair, his elbows resting on his knees. "Maybe to them, but not to me." The words struck her harder than any blow she had ever taken. She turned her face away, unable to meet his gaze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not once in her entire life. Her hands trembled as she set the cup down. Memories crawled back. The cold barracks, the cruel whispers, the laughter when she shivered on metal floors. She wanted to tell him everything, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, only fragments slipped out. I grew up in cages. Cold. Always cold. They told me I deserved it, that it was my bloodline, my dirty heritage. Even as a child, no one touched me. No one gave me warmth. I thought that's what life was, just surviving the nights. Her voice cracked and she bit her lip to stop it. She hated showing weakness. But the human did not mock her. He did not look away either. He listened, really listened. When she finally looked back at him, her eyes were wet, shining in the firelight. "Why are you different?" she whispered. "What do you want from me?" He shook his head slowly. "Nothing, just for you to live. That's all." She could not believe him. She wanted to scream that everyone wanted something, that no one ever gave without taking. But his steady gaze broke her protest before it could form. She pulled the blanket higher, burying her face in it. Her tears soaked into the fabric. The silence stretched again, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with something unfamiliar, safety. The hours passed, and she found herself watching him from the corner of her eye. The way he moved? Careful but confident. The way his presence filled the cabin with quiet strength. She had feared him when he first carried her inside, but now a different fear grew inside her, the fear of trusting him. Trust was dangerous. Trust could destroy her. Yet her heart betrayed her, beating faster every time his eyes met hers. She whispered again, so softly she thought he wouldn't hear. "If they come here, they will kill us both." He heard. His voice was steady, carrying no fear. "Then let them come." The words stole her breath. He said it like a challenge, as if death itself could not scare him. She did not know whether he was a fool or something else entirely. But deep inside, in the place where hope had long ago died, a spark flickered. That night, as the fire burned low, she lay in the bed while he sat in the chair, guarding the door. She closed her eyes, but not from weakness. For the first time, she allowed herself to rest without fear. Yet even in her half-sleep, her thoughts whispered warnings. He was different, too different. And she could not decide if that made him her savior or the most dangerous man she had ever met. The next day came heavy with silence, but it was not peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that made the skin crawl and the heart uneasy. She woke under the blanket, her body warm but her soul restless. The fire still burned faintly in the hearth, and the human was by the window, his eyes sharp, scanning the white horizon outside. His shoulders were tense, and his hand rested on something that looked like a weapon. She sat up slowly, her heart tightening. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice still weak. He didn't turn to her right away. His eyes stayed fixed outside. Then, with a low voice, he said, "They're searching." "Soldiers. Not far." The words froze her blood faster than the snow outside. She pulled the blanket tighter around her as if it could hide her from danger. Her lips trembled. "They're here. For me." He turned then, his gaze meeting hers. "Stay quiet. Don't move." Her heart pounded as he crossed the room and went to the door. He pushed it gently, making sure the latch was secure, then came back and crouched beside her bed. His eyes were calm, but there was fire hidden in them. "If they come here, I'll handle it. You must trust me." She shook her head frantically, tears already stinging her eyes. "No, you don't understand. If they find me, they won't just kill me. They'll kill you too. They'll burn this place to the ground." He placed one hand lightly on her shoulder, steadying her trembling. "Then we won't let them find you." The sudden knock at the door made both of them freeze. The sound echoed through the small cabin like thunder. She covered her mouth with her hand to stop the cry that nearly escaped her throat. The human stood, his movements slow, controlled. He motioned for her to stay low, then walked to the door. His voice was even, almost casual when he called out, "What do you want?" A harsh voice answered from outside, muffled by the wood and the storm. "We are searching the area. A fugitive has been seen nearby." "Open the door." Her heart nearly stopped. Her whole body shook under the blanket. She pressed herself down against the mattress, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. She could hear the crunch of boots in the snow, several of them. Soldiers. She imagined their armor, their weapons, their merciless eyes. The human didn't move to open the door. His voice stayed steady. "Haven't seen anyone. Only me here." The voice outside grew sharper. "Protocol demands we check every shelter. Open it. Now." Silence stretched. The fire cracked, the wind howled outside, and in that pause, she thought it was over. They would come inside, find her, drag her out. The warmth she had just begun to taste would be ripped away. Then the human spoke again, calm but firm. "Storm's bad. I've sealed the door to keep the heat in. No one here but me. You'll waste your time." The footsteps outside shifted. She could hear murmurs, low voices of the soldiers talking to each other. One pair of boots came closer, circling the house. Her eyes widened in terror. She knew what they had seen. Her footprints. Last night, when the human carried her here, they must have left a trail in the snow. The knock came again, harder this time. "We see tracks. They lead here." Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands clutched the blanket so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could not stop the tears sliding down her face. She whispered into the cloth, "It's over. They'll kill us." But the human's voice cut through the panic like steel. "Tracks? Those are mine. I was out chopping wood before the storm. You think I'd waste food feeding some stranger out here?" His tone shifted, carrying irritation, almost mockery. "If you're so sure, break the door. But you'll find nothing but me, and then you'll owe me for the wood you've let freeze." For a long moment, there was no answer. Only the sound of boots shifting, voices muttering in doubt. She held her breath until her lungs burned. Finally, the soldier's voice came again, rough and uncertain. "If you see anything, report at once." The footsteps began to move away. One by one, they grew fainter, swallowed by the storm. Her body collapsed into the bed, shaking with relief and fear all at once. She covered her face with her hands, silent sobs racking her chest. She could not believe it. They were gone. The human had faced them with nothing but words, and they had left. He returned from the door, his jaw tight, his eyes still blazing with focus. He crouched beside her again, his voice softer now. "They'll be back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they're hunting. You'll need to stay hidden." She turned her tear-streaked face toward him, her lips trembling. "Why did you lie for me? You risked your life. You should have given me to them." His gaze met hers, steady, unshaken. "Because you don't belong to them. You belong to yourself. And if they want to take you, they'll have to go through me first." Her heart twisted at his words. No one had ever spoken for her before. No one had ever stood between her and the danger. She tried to answer, but her voice broke, and all that came out was a choked whisper. "I don't understand you." He reached out, pulling the blanket back over her shoulders, tucking it around her like a shield. His hand lingered for a moment, not heavy, not demanding, only steady. Then he pulled away and went back to his chair by the fire, his eyes still on the door. She lay in the bed, her tears finally slowing. Fear still filled her chest, but beneath it, something else had begun to grow. Something fragile and dangerous, hope. Yet even as she drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought echoed again and again in her mind. They would come back. And next time, words alone might not be enough to keep them away. The night after the soldiers left was heavier than the storm itself. The fire glowed in the corner, but its warmth could not burn away the fear in her chest. She lay on the bed, the blanket pulled tight around her, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes. Every crackle of the wood made her jump. Every howl of wind outside sounded like the footsteps of soldiers returning. She wanted to believe she was safe, but her heart whispered that safety was only an illusion. The human sat near the door, his weapon resting across his lap. His face was calm, but his eyes stayed sharp, always watching, always ready. He had not gone to sleep, not even for a moment. She knew he was doing it for her. The thought made her chest ache. No one had ever stayed awake to protect her. No one had ever risked themselves for her. Hours passed, and she could not keep silent anymore. Her voice came soft, almost broken. "You should have given me to them." He turned his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Why would I do that?" Her lips trembled. "Because I'm not worth it. I told you before. My own people said it every day. I'm dirt, a mistake. Even if you save me now, what will it change?" He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. The sudden sound made her flinch, but his voice was steady, not cruel. "Don't ever say that again." He crossed the room slowly, kneeling beside the bed so his face was level with hers. The firelight flickered in his eyes. "You are alive. That alone makes you worth it. Do you understand?" She stared at him, her heart racing. No one had ever spoken like that to her. She wanted to believe, but the years of pain and cold whispered too loudly inside her. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She tried to turn away, to hide her weakness, but he reached out and gently touched her shoulder. The touch broke her. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, the sound shaking her entire body. The years of silence, of holding in her pain, poured out at once. She cried for the cages, for the nights on frozen floors, for every cruel laugh, and every day she thought she would never wake again. She cried because she did not know what else to do. The human didn't stop her. He didn't tell her to be quiet. He simply stayed there, his hand steady on her shoulder, his presence like a wall against the storm inside her. When her sobs slowed, she felt herself lean toward him helplessly, like a drowning person reaching for air. She pressed her forehead against his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into the first embrace she had ever known. She trembled in his hold, her voice breaking against his shirt. "I don't understand you. Why? Why risk everything? Why me?" He rested his chin lightly on her hair, his voice calm but firm. "Because no one deserves what they did to you, and because sometimes doing the right thing is reason enough." His words sank deep into her heart, cutting through the shadows she had carried all her life. She didn't know how to answer, so she only clung to him tighter, afraid that if she let go, the warmth would disappear. The night grew quieter. The storm outside faded little by little, leaving only the sound of the fire. For the first time, she felt her body relax completely. She breathed in deeply, and the warmth of his chest, the softness of the blanket, the strength of his arms, everything wrapped around her like a shield she had never imagined possible. She whispered then, so softly she wasn't sure if he heard, "I never had warmth before tonight. Never." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. There was no mockery in his face, no pity, only honesty. "Then tonight, let that change." Her breath caught, her tears drying slowly. She wanted to answer, but her voice was gone. Instead, she nodded, the smallest movement, but it carried all the trust she had left in her fragile heart. They stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other, while the world outside seemed ready to break them apart. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if the soldiers would return or if the cold would find her again. But in that moment, she knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer alone. As the firelight flickered low, she felt her eyelids grow heavy. This time, it was not the dangerous sleep of freezing death, but the safe pull of real rest. She leaned against him, her body relaxing fully for the first time in her life. He did not push her away. He let her stay. Before she drifted into sleep, one last thought whispered through her mind. If the soldiers came back, if death came tomorrow, it would not matter. Because for one night, she had known what it meant to be held, to be safe, to belong somewhere, even if that somewhere was only the arms of a human who should have been a stranger, but had become something far more. The fire crackled softly, the storm faded into silence, and in the shelter of that cabin, she closed her eyes, whispering into the dark, "Thank you." Her voice broke on the last word, but he heard it. He gave no answer, only pulled the blanket tighter around her and kept watch, his gaze steady on the door, ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in her life, she slept without fear. The morning came soft and pale, sunlight breaking through the thin cracks of the cabin walls. She woke slowly, her body warm, her head heavy, but her heart lighter than it had ever been. For a few moments, she didn't remember the fear, the soldiers, the cold nights. All she felt was the blanket around her and the quiet breath of safety. Then her eyes opened, and she saw him. The human was sitting near the fire again, sharpening a knife, his eyes calm and steady as always. She sat up, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. He noticed her, and for the first time, she thought she saw a small smile tug at his lips. "You slept," he said. Her cheeks warmed with embarrassment. "Yes, I think I did." Her voice was quiet, as though admitting the truth would break the fragile peace. He nodded once, simple, as if it was enough. He returned to his work, the sound of metal against stone filling the room. She watched him in silence, her thoughts tangled. She wanted to ask why he kept doing this, why he kept risking himself for her, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she rose slowly from the bed. Her legs trembled, weak from the days of cold and hunger, but she forced herself to stand. He noticed at once, setting the knife aside. "Careful," he warned. "I can walk," she whispered, though her steps betrayed her. She swayed, nearly falling, but his hand shot out, steadying her arm. His grip was strong, but gentle. She froze, her heart racing at the contact. His warmth spread into her skin like fire. "Not yet," he said firmly. "Your body still needs time." She wanted to argue, to say she had never had time, that she had always been forced to move even when her body was breaking. But something in his voice stopped her. It wasn't an order, not like the commands she had grown up with. It was concern, real concern. She lowered her eyes, swallowing her words, and allowed him to guide her back to the bed. The hours passed quietly. He gave her food, plain but warm, and she ate slowly, savoring every bite. Each piece was a treasure compared to the scraps she used to steal to survive. When she finished, she leaned back against the bed, her eyes drifting to him again. He was repairing something near the door, his movements steady, practiced. Her lips parted before she could stop herself. "Why do you do this?" He looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "Do what?" "All of this. The food, the bed, protecting me from the soldiers. Why? You don't even know me." For a moment, he didn't answer. His eyes softened, but there was weight behind them, like memories he carried that he did not speak of. Finally, he said, "Because I know what it's like to be hunted, to be alone. No one should live like that." Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask about his past, about who had hunted him, but she bit her tongue. She was afraid if she asked too much, the answers might push him away. Still, his words lit something inside her. For the first time, she felt like someone understood. The days passed in this rhythm, quiet meals, small conversations, and long silences that felt strangely comforting. She began to smile, small and cautious at first, like a child who had forgotten how. The human noticed, though he said nothing. Sometimes when she laughed softly at something, she thought she saw his eyes soften, as if her joy mattered to him. At night, she grew braver. She would talk, whispering pieces of her story into the darkness while he listened from his chair by the fire. She told him about the cages, about the cruel names they called her, about the endless winters with no warmth. Her voice would tremble, but she forced the words out. Each time, he listened without judgment, without interruption. And when she finished, when her chest was tight and her hands were shaking, he would simply say, "You're safe now." Those words became her anchor. She repeated them silently when fear clawed at her. But peace never lasted long. One evening, as the sun disappeared and the sky turned black, the silence outside broke. A faint crackle of sound came through the small device near his table, a transmission. He rose, frowning, and turned it on. The voice that filled the cabin made her blood run cold. "Unit patrol reporting. Tracks confirmed. The fugitive is near. Repeat, the fugitive is near. Prepare to move in." Her breath caught. She grabbed the blanket tightly, her whole body shaking. Her voice broke as she whispered, "They're coming back." The human shut the device with a snap, his face hardening. He turned to her, his voice steady but serious. "Listen to me. You'll stay hidden. No matter what you hear, you don't come out. Do you understand?" Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head violently. "They'll kill you this time. They won't just leave. I can't let you." He stepped closer, his hand gripping her shoulders firmly, his eyes locking onto hers. "You're not going back to them. Not while I'm alive. Do you hear me?" Her heart broke at his words. He was ready to risk everything again for her. She wanted to scream, to beg him not to, but her voice was trapped beneath the weight of his determination. Outside, the distant crunch of boots echoed through the snow. They were coming. The warmth of the cabin suddenly felt fragile, thin, like glass about to shatter. She pressed her forehead against his chest, clinging to him as if it was the last time. "Don't leave me," she whispered, her voice desperate. He placed one hand gently on the back of her head, holding her close. His voice was calm, unshaken. "I'm not leaving. I'll fight. And if I fall, you'll live. That's enough for me." Her tears spilled freely, soaking into his shirt. Fear and something deeper twisted inside her chest. She had never known what it meant to be cared for until now, and she was terrified of losing it. Terrified of losing him. The boots grew louder, surrounding the cabin. The human pulled away, grabbing his weapon, his eyes blazing with resolve. He gave her one last look, and in that look she saw everything. Strength, defiance, and the strange impossible truth that she mattered to him. Her heart pounded, torn between terror and hope. For the first time in her life, she whispered a silent prayer, not for herself, but for him. that he would survive, that they both would. And as the soldiers closed in, she knew that whatever happened next, the warmth she had found in this cabin, in this man, had already changed her forever. The night shook with danger. The soldiers surrounded the cabin, their boots crunching in the snow, their voices harsh and commanding. She crouched low in the bed, her hands clutching the blanket as though it could protect her. Her chest rose and fell too fast, each breath a desperate fight against panic. She had thought fear was something she knew well, but this was different, because now she wasn't afraid only for herself. She was afraid for him. The human stood tall in the middle of the cabin, his weapon gripped in steady hands. His face was calm, though the firelight showed the sharp lines of tension in his jaw. He glanced once at her, and his eyes told her everything. Stay down, stay hidden, trust me. She wanted to scream at him not to fight, not to risk his life for her, but her voice would not come. She only nodded, her eyes wet with tears. The first bang shook the door. Open in the name of command! The soldiers shouted. The wood rattled against its hinges, but the human did not move. He stood his ground, his voice loud and unshaken. No one here but me. You'll waste your time. Another bang, louder. Then the door cracked open as soldiers forced their way in, armored bodies filling the small space. The fire's glow lit their cold helmets, their weapons aimed, their eyes empty of mercy. One of them spotted the bed, the shape of her body hidden under the blankets. He stepped forward, his weapon raising. Her heart nearly stopped. She squeezed her eyes shut, whispering in her mind, "It's over. They'll take me." But before the soldier could reach her, the human moved like fire itself. He slammed the nearest soldier into the wall, his weapon flashing, his fists striking with brutal precision. The cabin erupted into chaos. Shouts, gunfire, the sound of wood splintering. She cried out, covering her ears, her heart breaking, as she watched him fight against impossible odds. He moved with the strength of a storm. Every strike he delivered carried defiance. Every step said he would not surrender her. But there were too many. They closed in, surrounding him, pressing him back. One soldier's weapon hit his shoulder, and he stumbled, pain flashing across his face. She let out a scream, her voice tearing the air. "No, stop!" Her cry froze the soldiers for a heartbeat, their helmets turning toward her. That single pause was enough for the human. With a roar, he surged forward, knocking one soldier aside, tearing another's weapon from his hands. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, but everything to protect. Her fear turned into something else. Fury. She couldn't just hide. Not anymore. Not after all he had done for her. She threw off the blanket and stumbled from the bed, grabbing the heavy piece of wood from beside the fire. Her body was weak, her hands trembling, but her heart burned with a strength she had never felt before. When one soldier lunged at the human from behind, she screamed and swung the wood with all her strength. The blow cracked against the soldier's helmet, and he staggered. The human turned, his eyes widening when he saw her. "Stay back," he shouted. But she shook her head, tears streaming. "Not without you." Together, they fought. She struck with clumsy but desperate swings while he moved like a shield around her, blocking every strike that came too close. It was chaos, firelight, and shadows, but little by little the tide shifted. The soldiers, unprepared for such resistance, began to falter. One fell, another stumbled out the door, retreating into the snow. The last soldier cursed and raised his weapon, aiming at her. She froze, her heart stopping. But before the shot could fire, the human leapt in front of her, his body slamming into the soldier. They crashed into the wall, and the weapon clattered to the floor. In a final burst of strength, the human struck the soldier down, leaving him unconscious in the snowstorm outside. Silence fell, heavy and broken only by their ragged breathing. The cabin was wrecked, wood splintered, furniture overturned, but they were alive. She stared at him, her chest heaving, her tears mixing with sweat. He was bleeding from his shoulder, his face pale with exhaustion, but his eyes were still steady, still burning with the same fire that had carried them through. Her legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, her hands covering her face. But this time she wasn't crying from fear. She was crying because she finally understood. He had chosen her again and again, even when it meant facing death. He knelt beside her, his hand brushing her arm gently. "It's over. They're gone." She shook her head, sobbing. "They'll come back. They'll never stop." He looked at her, his gaze firm. "Then we'll keep fighting." Together. Her heart trembled at the word together. She had never been part of anything before, never been wanted, never been chosen. She reached out, her fingers gripping his hand tightly. I don't want to run anymore, she whispered. I don't want to be alone. If I have to fight, I'll fight with you. His hand closed around hers, warm and strong despite the blood and the bruises. For a moment, the fear melted away, leaving only the strange, impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, they could survive. Later, when the fire was rebuilt and the cabin quiet again, she lay beside him, not on the floor, not hidden in fear, but in his bed, the bed that had once been only his. The blanket wrapped around them both, their bodies close, their breaths steadying together. She whispered into the silence, her voice fragile but filled with truth. I never had a warm bed, human, until you made it ours. He turned his head, his tired eyes meeting hers. And though he said nothing, the way he pulled her closer, the way his arm held her as if she was something worth protecting, said more than words ever could. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin there was warmth. Real warmth. The kind she had been denied all her life. The kind she would never let go of again. And as she drifted into sleep, her final thought was not fear, but something new and dangerous. Hope that tomorrow could belong to them both.